Hey friends, thanks for stopping by. It's Laurie. Let's go make some Dollar Tree gnomes. I'm starting my 3 gnome project by recycling 2x4 pieces of wood that I found in my kindling bin. Each piece measures 14 inches in height, and I started my cut at the 6-inch mark on the side, and I continued at an angle until I came to a point. I'm using a piece of sanding screen. I'm just kind of lightly sanding down the edges just to take away any of the rough spots or any splinters. And these don't have to be perfectly cut or shaped. They're just going to be the base for your gnome, and you're really not going to see them. When I was done, I then gave each of them a base coat of white acrylic paint. Now that all 3 pieces have a coat of paint and they're dry, I'm going to start with my lemon gnome. I'm starting my hair or my beard using a Dollar Tree white utility towel. I found this in the automotive section, and I'm folding it over and measuring it against the 6-inch mark on my form. I'm then cutting my towel in half, and I'm making sure to cut off the finished edges. I'm keeping it folded, and then I'm cutting about 1/2-inch strips, leaving myself about a 1-inch border at the top. Once again, these don't have to be perfect. Close enough is just fine. When I'm done, this being a terry cloth towel, there are a bunch of frayed pieces, so I just gave it a good shaking to clean them off. To dye my fabric, I'm going to use some of this inexpensive Dollar Tree coffee, and I'm placing 2 heaping tablespoons into 2 cups of hot water. When I was done, I just placed my towel into my mixture, and I let it set up for an hour. After the hour, I tightly wrung out my towel, and then I placed it on a cookie sheet in my oven at 250 degrees for about 30 minutes. When it was dry, I took a chenille stem, and the color doesn't matter, and then I slid it through the opening on the top where I left the 1-inch uncut fabric. When I was done, I then slid both ends of the fabric to the middle. I then placed some hot glue on the front of my form just before the angled sides. I attached my beard, and then I glued each chenille stem to the side and snipped off the excess. For my nose, I'm using a wooden knob along with this pretty green acrylic paint, but the table tennis balls from the Dollar Tree work just as well, and I'm using 2 of those for my next 2 gnomes. With my nose dry, I placed some hot glue on the center of my form and attached my nose into place. Today I'm participating in the Bring in the Summer with Flowers Friend Hop hosted by my friends Janny and Dyanne from Deco Easy. They have an amazing channel with beautiful DIY projects, and I'll be linking that below in my description so you can go on over and check it out. To follow along on the Friend Hop, I will have one of these talented ladies linked below in my description, and once you've finished with my video, hop on over and check out their channel. For my hat, I'm using one of the fabric lemon placemats from the Dollar Tree. I'm placing it over my gnome's head, so I'm cutting a slice through the backing. When I'm done, I then slide it over my gnome's head. Once I decide where I want it placed, I then trim off some of the fabric, making sure to leave enough to wrap around the back of my hat. I then add a line of glue across the top of my gnome's nose, and I attach my fabric into place. I then add my hot glue to one side of the form, and then pull my fabric down at an angle, and then I follow the exact same instructions and do the same on the other. I tucked a little bit of polyfill under the hat and around the nose to fill out the fabric. This part doesn't look too glamorous, but I'm pulling one side of my fabric and I'm hot gluing it to the back of my form. When I'm done, I then fold the other side of the fabric over and I hot glue it as tightly as I can to the back of the form. From there, I continue to fold my fabric over and hot glue it as tightly as I can against the back of my form. I'm adding a bow accent to the front of the hat, and I found this really pretty lemon ribbon at the Dollar Tree. I'm making a simple bow, and when I'm done, I'm attaching it to the front with my glue gun. To make arms for my gnome, I cut about a 10-inch strip out of the leftover placemat fabric. On the wrong side of the fabric, I ran a bead of hot glue down the center. I then folded one side over and attached it together. I then ran another bead of glue down the center and folded it over, attaching both pieces together. I then folded my fabric strip in half and I cut it in the center. Now that my arms are ready, I'm going to make my lemon flower basket by using one of these candle cups that I had on hand. I used my white acrylic paint and I gave it a coat. Now that the paint has dried, and let me tell you, I'm no artist, I'm going to attempt to pencil on a lemon. Now that I'm done, and it is far from perfect, I'm going to fill in the outline with some yellow acrylic paint. I had a small leaf in my stash, and I'm hot gluing it onto my basket. As part of the friend hop, we need to add flowers into our projects, so I'm adding these pretty white and yellow flowers into my basket. With my basket complete, I'm now going to attach the hands. I placed a dot of hot glue on the side and then attached my fabric, folding it over. After I did it on one side, I then did the same on the other. To attach my basket onto the gnome, I'm finding its placement in the center, and then I'm sliding the arms under the hair. Then using my glue gun, I'm hot gluing one arm on each side, and I'm cutting away the excess fabric. To finish up, I gave my gnome a haircut, and with that, my summertime lemon gnome is complete. For my second DIY, I'm using this blue faux fur pillow from the Dollar Tree. And I'm also using their Don't Flip Out red, white, and blue towel. I'm using the pillow as my beard, so I'm separating it from the backing. And I'll also be using the polyfill. To get the measurement for my beard, I placed it against my gnome form and then cut it to size. I then used my glue gun to attach it to my form, making sure that I left a small U shape in the middle where I can attach the nose. For his nose, I'm using one of the table tennis balls from the Dollar Tree, and I'm painting it this pretty coral acrylic paint. And I'm actually going to be painting two of them because I'm using one in my next project as well. Now that it's dry, I'm hot gluing it to my form. I'm pulling down the voided area in the beard and attaching it in place. I then added some hot glue on both sides and pulled the beard up around the nose. To make a mustache for my gnome, I cut a 2 by 5 inch piece out of the pillow fur. On the bottom side of the fabric, I added a line of hot glue and then I folded it in half. I then placed a dot of hot glue in the center and then pinched it together. I added some hot glue under the nose and then attached my mustache into place. I then used my scissors to trim it into the shape of a beard. To add the hat, I'm using the striped side of my open towel. I'm placing a line of hot glue over my gnome's nose and then I'm attaching the towel. And just like I did in my first project, I added some hot glue to the side and then I pulled the fabric down at an angle. I laid my towel out flat and then once again I cut away the excess, making sure I had enough to wrap around the gnome. And just like my first project, I used a handful of polyfill to fill out the front of my hat. I turned my gnome over and I added some hot glue to the back, and then I folded over my fabric and attached it into place. I added a bead of hot glue on the folded area and then folded over my next piece of fabric. I then added some hot glue on the other side, folded my fabric over and attached that into place. Just like my first project, I continued adding hot glue and folding over the fabric as tight as possible until my end was folded into a point. To embellish my hat, I'm using 3 pieces of this pretty red, white, and blue star ribbon that I found at Michael's. I measured and cut all 3 pieces, and then I hot glued them to the hat. I'm giving my gnome some arms, and I'm using the same matching ribbon. I'm folding over the ribbon, and then I'm tying the end into a knot. I then cut off the extra end. I tried it up against my gnome and I decided how long I wanted his arm to be. I then made a second arm for the other side. When I was done, I then added some hot glue to each arm and I folded it in half. To attach my arms, I used my hot glue gun and placed them at the beginning of the hat line. I made my gnome a little flower flag basket to hold, just like I did in my first project. I took the basket and I slid it over my gnome's hands, and then using my glue gun, I attached the 2 hands together. To embellish my hat, I had this clear plastic star on hand. I painted it red and I attached it to the front of my hat. I found this package of sparkly stars at Michael's and I attached a white and a blue one onto my star. To bring in the summer flowers, I'm adding some Dollar Tree flowers to the top of my gnome's hat. I didn't have a planned out pattern where I was going to attach them. I just started hot gluing them on here and there until I filled out the top of the hat. I finished up my gnome by adding 1 additional flower onto his hat and a little accent bow to the side. And with that, my patriotic summer gnome is complete. I'm starting my 3rd DIY by using this faux hair that I picked up at Michael's. I'm measuring the beard against the form, just like I did in my last project, and then I'm cutting it to size. I hot glued it into place, once again leaving an opening for the nose. When I was done, I then hot glued my nose into place. And just like in my last project, I hot glued the sides of the beard up around the nose. I'm using some random Dollar Tree flowers that I had left over from previous projects, and I'm starting to hot glue them onto my gnome's hat. I continued on adding my flowers here and there until I had the gnome's entire hat covered. After all my flowers were in place, I then added in some green leaves to give it that country gnome vibe. With my gnome's hat complete, I'm now giving his beard a little trim. I gave my gnome a mustache by pulling apart a little bit of the hair and twisting it to the side. To finish up, I'm using these 2 bumblebees that I found at Michael's, and I'm attaching one onto the gnome's hat and the other onto his beard. And with that, my summertime gnome is complete. I hope you enjoyed making these gnomes with me, and if you're new and you haven't yet subscribed and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. I'll see you very soon. Bye, everybody.